What happens if I don't have a power of attorney? So in this video, I want to talk about if I don't make a power of attorney for property and personal care and I lose capacity to make my own decisions, then what happens? So the law does have an answer for us, and it's pretty different depending on whether we're talking about property or personal care. So let's start with personal care. If I make a power of attorney for personal care, I'm appointing someone to act as my attorney for personal care for any of those decisions, personal care decisions that I am not capable of making. And it can be piecemeal. I might be capable of some and not others. Personal care covers healthcare, nutrition, shelter, clothing, hygiene, safety. So it covers a variety of personal care kinds of decisions. Healthcare is the one most people think about and are most concerned about. So what happens if I never make a POA? Well, the Healthcare Consent Act has me covered. We all have a substitute decision maker by default, and we've done a different video on who that is. So if I don't make one, by default for me, it would be my husband, who is my substitute decision maker for all of my medical decisions that I can't make for myself. And then when it comes to decisions like nutrition, clothing, hygiene, safety, shelter, I have found as a lawyer, most of the time those don't present practical issues. So in the majority of cases, people kind of can get by without that. Of course, there are exceptions, especially if there's conflict in a family about who's making decisions or some kind of unique circumstance. But in most cases, it's fine. So most likely I would be fine if I had no power of attorney for personal care and my husband is somebody I'm happy to have. I've appointed him anyway under the POA, so I'm happy with what the default in the law is. Probably I'd be okay. There are still reasons to do power of attorney for personal care. Of course, I still have one. I've appointed my husband, even though he would be my default, because all the other stuff I put in the document about what my wishes are. So I made the document not for the appointment of my attorney, but who, not the who, but the what. What are the wishes? Here's my instructions and all of that. So that was the value to me of making a power of attorney for personal care. So not the end of the world. Power of attorney for property, if I don't have one, it could be a disaster. And we do a lot of guardianship work here, and this is where guardians are needed to step in. If there is no power of attorney, guardian is what fills the gap. And that's true for personal care as well. Somebody can say, I need to go apply to become guardian of the person because there's no power of attorney. So guardianship fills the gap when there's no POA for both. So if I did not have a power of attorney for property, I would likely need someone in my family to step up and apply to become guardian of property. And if I didn't have anyone in my family, the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee might agree to do that. Because what happens if there's no power of attorney for property? There is no one in charge of my property. So healthcare, there's a default. We all have a decision maker for our healthcare. For property, there's no default. Not even my husband. He is only allowed legally to touch our joint bank account or any property that we jointly own. But bank accounts that are in my name, my separate credit cards, everything that's just mine, there's nobody, not a spouse, not my parents, not my kids, no one has access to it. No one has legal authority. And unfortunately, what happens when there's no power of attorney for property is there's a gap. And even when someone wants to become guardian, there's still a gap because it can take months to go through the guardianship process. And during that time, bills don't get paid. People's heat can get turned off. Their mortgage can go unpaid for several months. So they're risking their housing. They might have nobody that's available to pay for whether medication, clothing, food. So other family members are, if they're lucky, reaching into their pockets, trying to subsidize that, hoping they'll get paid back. It creates a lot of complications when there's no power of attorney for property. So that's really it. If there's no power of attorney for personal care, we all have a substitute decision maker. And if you can live with that person, it's not the end of the world, but power of attorney for property, there's a very serious gap that no one has legal authority. And that puts the person managing money who steps in to help at legal risk because they don't have authority. And it puts any person who lacks capacity at risk because no one is entitled to access their bank account or do all the managing of the property that otherwise should be done. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you in the next one.